I think sometimes we disqualify ourselves by thinking, oh, well, I don't have that many transactions, or, oh, my profit's not that good. And then I look at your books and I'm like, you're going to pay a crap ton of taxes on that. We need to get in there and help you. Hello, hello. So today we're going to talk about why you owe so much in taxes. I think this is like such a common topic and question that business owners have. And I think it kind of gets glossed over a little bit because most tax accounting firms are only looking at your books after the books have happened, whereas you really need to be more proactive about it. So that is why we're addressing this. I think it's a common issue that business owners run into, and they're looking for a solution, but the solution isn't always like evident. So today, Andrea and I decided to talk about that alongside how cash flow can support you so that you can actually implement tax strategy and the difference between tax prep and tax strategy, because I think that is something that a lot of people don't know the difference between, and they just assume if you have a CPA that they're going to help you be strategic about your taxes, and that's just simply not the case. So Andrea, I would love to hear why you feel like most business owners operate reactively versus proactively.
They're busy. They've got their heads down in the business. They're running day-to-day operations. They feel like they're making a lot of money because they see a lot of cash coming in. And when cash comes in, they're like, oh, I can spend it now, or I can take a distribution. And they're not tracking throughout the year what they're going to owe in April.
For sure.
So April comes around really fast, and then they're stuck paying this huge tax bill where they've paid out all of their cash, or they've paid themselves too much, or they've transferred too much in distributions, and they're really caught off guard because they didn't plan ahead.
For sure. I think the thing I most commonly see is that people don't do their books until it's tax time. So they legitimately have no hope of catching what is happening at that point because they're only seeing it after it's all the way done. And then the other side of that is if they do outsource it, they usually just like worry about it in April versus like looking at it throughout the year. That's
exactly. And bookkeeping shouldn't just be a tool that you use to get your taxes done.
For sure.
You should be using the data from the bookkeeping to make decisions, because that's just going to make you a better CEO and it'll help you make more money ultimately. So you should be doing your bookkeeping consistently, whether it's you doing it or a bookkeeper, and using those reports every single month to make decisions on if you're going to hire, if you're going to purchase more equipment, how you're going to use that cash to scale your business, and also plan ahead for taxes.
For sure. I think that is one of my biggest pieces of advice to business owners is the first thing to outsource is your bookkeeping so you can actually make strategic decisions. I think most business owners think, well, I can just do it. And then they don't do it. And then they wait till April. And then all of a sudden, everything they could have strategically done throughout the year is just like not an option anymore. And they find themselves in that cycle because they're not even thinking about doing it until April. And at that point, you're already through Q1 of the next year. And I think people lose track of time too.
Totally. And actually, we just hired a bookkeeper.
Yes.
And so this is like a firsthand example of why you should outsource as much as you possibly can, because we both can do bookkeeping. We understand financials, and just being inside of your own books and looking at each transaction, that's not how you should be spending your time as the CEO, because getting yourself out of the weeds, you're able to make higher level decisions. And so that's why it's important to hire help, outsource what you can so that you're really in your zone of genius and doing what you do best.
Well, and like not only do we outsource like the company we have together, but we both individually have other companies and we outsource bookkeeping there because we just know we are very client focused. So we're going to spend our time doing the client stuff versus our own stuff because we can just get to it later. And I think that's what most business owners run into is like this idea that they'll get to it when they have time and then they just never really have time. Right. I mean, like,
Right.
I know that's me for sure. Like, I would love to be as proactive in my own business as I am in everybody else's business. But truly, it's usually we prioritize client work above all else. And I've seen that a lot with my clients too.
Which we should. We should be putting the client first. We should be making their experience as best as we possibly can. But it can really hurt when tax time comes around and you don't have the cash to pay your tax bill and you didn't look at strategies to reduce your tax bill because you were so busy worrying about your clients and worrying about their experience when then later it actually hurts your clients because you're unable to invest more into them.
For sure. Speaking of strategy, can you simply put the difference between tax prep and tax strategy and how to know if somebody offers true tax strategy versus just them preparing your filing at the end of the year?
Yeah, so tax prep is basically just taking everything that already happened throughout the year and just putting it on a form and saying this is what you owe in tax. So this is bad because there's nothing you can do about it at tax time. And this is what most CPAs actually do. They're just taking the data that you give them and telling you what you owe. But tax planning is working alongside someone throughout the year, looking at your story and writing the story together. So saying this is what your financials look like. Here's where you want to end up based on your goals. And this is what we can do to get you there. So it's really like drafting the story with your CPA together before you owe the tax.
Yeah. And just to clarify for the listener on the other end, like the difference between strategy and planning is none. So tax planning and tax strategy are essentially the same thing. And the idea behind it is to have the goal focus first, where we are helping you figure out what is the best tax picture for whatever that goal is that is coming up. And I feel like when we started working together was the first time I truly understood what tax strategy could do for somebody. You know, I live in the financial analysis world. I'm looking at cash. I'm looking at making sure you have the best net income and all of those things. And so it didn't necessarily occur to me on that from that seat that it was almost just as important to make the tax plan while we were generating all the revenue and all the cash, because otherwise you would then be paying all that cash out in taxes.
Right.
So what would you say is like one of the biggest wins you've seen with somebody who went from like just getting tax prep done to somebody who did and implemented true tax strategy?
I'd say the biggest win is when we've saved clients over $50,000. Last year, we saved someone $75,000 just by working with them the second half of 2025. So the second half of the year, we worked alongside them to come up with a plan to reduce their tax bill. And what was cool was they showed a lot of income on the books. So they showed high profit. But on the tax return, they didn't show as much. Mm-hmm. So they were able to save a ton of tax, and it was all because of tax planning.
I love that. Now, what do you find is like the biggest pitfall for your clients when they are trying to do tax strategy, but maybe don't have the support from like the cash flow side of things?
Well, a lot of people, they want to do tax planning and they don't want to pay a ton to the IRS, which makes sense, but they're unable to find the cash to deploy those strategies. And so what are some ways that you can help people find the cash to do these tax strategies?
Yes. And I feel like, one thing we realized doing tax strategy with people is that mainly people just didn't have the cash available and they didn't really know where to find it. So a lot of what we've focused on this past year, 2 years, is finding like common places people can get their cash. And so expense audits are like the hands down best way to get quick cash, which is like canceling stuff that doesn't have a return on for you anymore. So like, for example, usually we will subscribe to a free trial and then we're like 2 years into it and we forget.
Oh yeah,
we're
I'm
still
guilty of that.
The other thing is sometimes we have tools that overlap, right? So we bought the cheap version and then we upgraded to like a higher version and we forgot we still had the cheap version of the thing. The other thing is like people will find that they could do an annual subscription versus monthly and save there as well. Or if they're tight on cash, it might make sense to pay the monthly versus the annual. So like those are a couple things expense audit wise. The other most consistent issue I see with clients is their pricing. Their pricing doesn't consider that they have overhead in their business. They're only usually building their prices based on the cost associated with doing the work, not necessarily the cost associated with like turning the lights on. So doing a pricing analysis also is another way where we can figure out if every sale that you're making is actually profitable or it's actually losing. Because that I have seen where we've recovered about like $1.4 million because we were able to recognize the pricing associated with projects. We're not factoring in that we needed to have all the software and turn the lights on that day and so on and so forth. And this client that I'm specifically thinking about too.
Wow, that would make a huge dent on your bottom line and also it would free up a ton of cash to either put into retirement accounts, invest back into the business, pay your kids. Like there's so many different tax strategies that you could deploy just by having that extra cash.
For sure. What would you like if somebody's like, okay, you've sold me. I need tax strategy. I need cash flow analysis, like whatever. What would you recommend now that we're in that like midpoint of the year? The first thing you would say someone should do?
Definitely get your bookkeeping done.
Yes.
Because we can't do our job without clean data and clean books. But if you don't have your bookkeeping done and you do need help with that, we are able to help. We have a great bookkeeping team at Thorn that can come in and help you get everything cleaned up and also help you understand your books to make sure you can do it consistently going forward if it is something that you want to do yourself or if you have an admin person that wants to do it.
For sure. Well, and also just remember, y'all, the later you get in the year, the more expensive cleanup is. I think this is something that always takes people by surprise is that you literally get charged per month of cleanup because you're essentially accelerating bookkeeping over a short period of time. And so it is much cheaper to pay a bookkeeper throughout the year than it is to have to do the cleanup piece of it. So the sooner you can get someone in there and get it up and running, the better, for sure.
That's such a good point. And bookkeepers, they get so busy in December and in January. So they're already fully booked. They're going to be charging you their premium prices because they don't need your business. So if you get ahead of it and you hire someone right now or in the summer, you'll get a great deal. And then when you get to the end of the year or January, they'll have to do like 1 or 2 months to get you tax ready.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, by far, if you just need to do one thing, it would definitely be bookkeeping. The next thing I would just recommend is jumping on a call with us. For honestly, my favorite thing to do is to troubleshoot whatever your current problem is. Whether or not it makes sense for us to move forward, we can decide that on the call. But I think when we get on these calls, it's great for me to be able to hear the full picture from what your situation is and give you personalized advice of what your next step is. I think sometimes we disqualify ourselves by thinking, oh, well, I don't have that many transactions, or, oh, my profit's not that good. And then I look at your books and I'm like, you're going to pay a crap ton of taxes on that. We need to get in there and help you. And I'm looking at your bank account and you have no cash to actually pay those taxes or to do tax strategies. So you need help there too. This is just like the common thing where you're like, y'all, hire the expert. Let the expert look at it.
Yeah. Everyone's situation is different too. So it is important to book calls just to see if that firm or that person can actually help. Because if we can't help you, we're going to be honest and we're going to point you in the right direction where you can be helped. So
yeah. And like not everybody's at the point in their business to have like the full blown package that we offer. And we're really honest about that with people. For us, we're building rapport and trust with you because we know what it takes to outsource this stuff and what it actually feels like to have people having an opinion of how you've run your business up until this point. And so like, we feel that responsibility when we are working with you, whether it's on a discovery call or it is like actually working with you in your books. We know it's an honor and we want to respect that too, to like work alongside you. So,
yeah. So where do people find out how to work with us or how to book a call with us?
It's going to be in the show notes, but you can always go to thornadvisors.com. There is an opportunity to book a call right on our website. And if nothing else, you can follow us at Thorn Advisors on Instagram. We both post pretty regularly about what we got going on. Andrea is fantastic at giving you all the nuts and bolts of things you should think about when it comes to the accounting side of things. My posts are more like get you in your feels and make you think about how you're doing life, that type of thing. But all in all, it's very well-rounded, I think. So if you guys are interested, feel free to reach out to us and look for us on Instagram.